Live nationwide and streaming live at lesliemarshallshow.com. Call in with your thoughts at 888-6-LESLIE.
Here to set you free. How you doing? I'm back from vacation, back from Washington, D.C., although it was kind of a covert operation. People didn't know I was there. And before we bring our guest on, somebody had a really good idea. So I hope the people are listening. I am not, people ask me, I've had a number of people ask me because they see me drink Coke Zero when I do the show often because it's my drug of choice. Anyway, I've had people ask me if it's like product placement. And if not, that, Coca-Cola should be paying me for drinking it on my show. So Coca-Cola, why don't you pay me for drinking it on the show? Am I allowed to say? Yeah, I'm allowed to say that, right? Anyway, I do drink water too. That's good as well. I'm so glad to have back with us. I really enjoyed the last time he was on, Roy Houseman. Mr. Houseman is legislative director for the United Steelworkers, and he's been a part of the union's legislative and policy department since 2011. He worked on a broad and continues to work on a broader range of issues, including trade and pensions. Now, before being in Washington, D.C., he actually worked at the former Smurfit Stone paper mill in Missoula, Montana, serving as president of USW Local 885. And after a trade-related mill closure back in 2010, he completed a Master's of Public Administration degree. I want to point that out because we were just talking off the air, that people think it's terrible. I really do. I think they think, union workers, USW, union, steel, grunt, tough guy. Yeah, you can be tough guy. Numerous men and women, very educated, very intelligent people. You don't have to be a white collar worker to be educated. And I think it's very smart for people to get into trade schools and to have blue collar jobs because God knows when I was paying off my student loans, a lot of those people were buying houses and putting money in the bank that I didn't yet have. But with all those degrees. But speaking of a degree, like I said, Roy completed a Master's of Public Administration from the University of Montana, and he used trade adjustment assistant benefits, which you can do if you're part of a union. Roy's efforts on aiding steelworkers qualify for trade adjustment benefits has qualified over 10,000, I'm going to say that again, over 10,000 union members across the country for work training because of trade impacts. He's been on the show multiple times. It's good to have him with us. He always gives a great interview. I always learn a lot, and I enjoy having him on. Excited to have him back. Roy, thank you for joining us. Do you prefer Mr. Houseman? I think we're on a first name basis now, Roy, aren't we?
Yeah, I would say so. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you guys today.
Absolutely. Because I want people to know more when we're not on the air, please follow Roy on Twitter at Roy Houseman, Roy Houseman, Houseman, just like it sounds. And also follow the Steelworkers on Twitter at Steelworkers, and go to their website, learn a lot more about what the USW does, because it does a whole heck of a lot. Even though I'm really familiar with them, I was like, oh God, I didn't know you did that. USW.org. Roy, thank you for joining us, and so much to talk about. So let's get to it. Our nation historically was the leader in manufacturing, right? We used to be on the cutting edge of manufacturing innovation. There's been declining investment in manufacturing in the United States, certainly outsourcing, corporations trying to HO in Mexico and Bangladesh and China and places like that. We've also had decades of bad trade deals, and it's left our nation at a competitive disadvantage. It results in plummeting numbers of good manufacturing jobs. The BLS calculated manufacturing employment fell from 19.6 million in 79 to 12.8 million in 2019. That's down 35%. I want to talk about first those numbers, okay? I said last night on television, because we were talking about the supply chain issue, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to talk about that cog in the wheel. And I was worried people get mad at me last night, and they didn't. I was surprised, but we as consumers are partially responsible for this, aren't we? I mean, I say that because when I was a little girl, I remember picking up this teacup I thought was pretty, and my grandmother turned it over, said made in China, and I didn't say this on TV. I said junk, but she said that's crap, put it back. And I just remember, and then we know the song "Look for the Union Label." Um, can we make lemons out of lemonade with this clog in the wheel? Can we turn some of the competitive disadvantage that we have, specifically, in manufacturing here in the United States, around? Because if you don't buy your stuff from China and other places, we wouldn't have this wouldn't be a problem, and it's a problem. I mean, when you go to Target and the shelves are bare, then again, I must say, it also teaches us, I think, how lucky and spoiled we are, right, as a nation, and to do
Yeah.
with less. Well, but let's talk about that, because what we're talking about is good manufacturing jobs. Why wouldn't corporations, seeing this clog in the wheel, seeing this hatred toward China, Russia, et cetera, and what's happening on a global level, and we're not just talking about inflation, we are talking about supply chain issues. Why wouldn't corporations make the products here again? They would come out as heroes. More people would buy their products. There would be creating jobs, and not just creating jobs, but creating better product. Because we know the reasons T-shirts are 3 for $10 is you wear them once, you wash them, and they're done. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, this is actually a really good point, right? Like for our members, which, as you pointed out, we make a whole host of commodities that kind of are like in the base subset, right? So steel, paper, glass, all of these major materials, the plastic that comes in that Coke bottle, for example, all of these materials and chemicals that are produced, our union makes. And we know that like other countries have been doing all this investment. They've been providing direct support to manufacturers, to encourage multinational corporations to source in foreign countries, but also it has created a competitive disadvantage. There's this innovation effort that we often talk about with manufacturing, that if the R&D and the manufacturing is done in the same right next to each other, you have this like virtuous cycle that builds. And so we see this as an opportunity here when we talk about manufacturing, is that Congress has a role here. Governments have been playing a role across the world about pushing manufacturing. China puts 5-year plans on individual products and they build them out. Well, there's no reason that the US can't do the same thing, right? And I think that's one of the major reasons why we're so excited about these two bills. We call USICA here in DC, and COMPETES, right? They have acronyms, they're very long. The United States Innovation and Competition Act, for example, is the USICA bill. And COMPETES is actually an acronym too, but I'm just going to call it COMPETES because I can't even tell you the full name of that one. And it's a situation where we know if these bills, when done right, they will provide billions of dollars for manufacturers and workers to improve their workplaces and actually compete globally. And I think that that's something that we really we're excited to kind of see. We've had a ton of votes already in the House and Senate on this, and we're kind of on the final stages. And this is an opportunity for us to see what we could see, almost $200 billion in manufacturing spending and an innovation competition, all of the things that will allow our country to continue to maintain its competitive edge.
Because like when you talk about competition, I mean, the numero uno competitor we want to compete with and need to compete with is China, right? And other nations, obviously. This can help regrow our critical supply chains that we talked about, and also invest in manufacturing, not just now, but looking forward into the future. Let's talk about these two bills.
Sure.
First, I'm going to ask the one in the House and one in the Senate, aimed at helping us stay competitive against China, aimed at protecting workers against those greedy multinational corporations who are sending our jobs overseas, and seek out those low wages overseas, and also illegal subsidies in foreign countries and child labor, I might add. Are these two? Let's break it. I guess we have 2 minutes. Let's break it down. The Senate bill is the United States Innovation and Competition Act, like you said, USICA. Now, the Senate bill, is this comprehensive enough? Can you break down a little bit of what the Senate bill does, and we can talk after the break about the House bill?
Sure. So really quickly on the Senate bill, we found the Senate bill lacking in a few key items, but it has some pieces that will help with the science and technology side that will allow for workers and these companies to better work with universities and others to bring technology to manufacturing. Those are important. But they also included some tariff cuts that we think aren't totally necessary, and they didn't incorporate a lot of other pieces. So we think that there's an opportunity with the Senate bill, but we took the House bill and we also kind of really ran with the football there. And we'll talk about it more on the other side of the break as you're talking about. But I think for us, we see there's one big piece is the CHIPS Act, and this is in both bills, but in the Senate bill, this is kind of the star piece, and this is $50 billion, $52 billion actually, to help reinvigorate our domestic semiconductor supply chain, which has gone from about 35% of global chip production down to like 12% of global chip production. And as everyone knows, when they talk about a car, you can't have a car without a semiconductor chip these days.
Correct.
So,
yeah, my brother worked in semiconductors. He lost his job. It was shipped overseas.
oh wow.
Yeah, he's a chemical engineer, and that's his business, semiconductors, or was for most of his life. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to have more with you, more with our guest, Roy Houseman, Legislative Director for the United Steelworkers. Be sure to follow him on Twitter at Roy Houseman. At Steelworkers, follow the USW, and check out their website, usw.org. Back right after this, I'm Leslie Marshall.
I want to get back to seeing my grandbabies every Sunday and smothering them with big hugs and kisses.
I want to get back to football games with my boys.
I want to get back to feeling and touching, connecting with the people around me.
I want to get back to family dinners and my grandma's mac and cheese.
I want to get back to real grocery shopping, taking my time, walking down every aisle, smelling the tomatoes and melons, having a free sample or two, or 3.
COVID-19 has changed how we live and how we feel. But now, there are vaccines. And they are the first step that let us get back to feeling optimistic about the days ahead of us. It's okay to have questions.
Is it safe?
Should I get it?
Should I wait?
Now, get the facts. Learn more at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Hey, sis, missed you this morning. Kim told me you weren't feeling well, so I'm just doing a self-care check.
Oh, thank you, friend.
How you doing?
Girl, listen, my energy was so low because I didn't eat breakfast when I got up, so I had to miss virtual yoga with y'all.
Trust me, I understand.
But I'm doing much better now that I've eaten, so I'm back on track.
Great. In that case, let's get some steps in tonight. I'll come over and we can walk around the lake.
Sounds good. Appreciate you being in my business, too. Now, let me get in yours. Did you check your blood pressure today?
I did that and my squats, okay?
Okay.
High blood pressure is not going to be my friend if I can help it. See you at 6?
Let's get it. See you then.
Now more than ever, it's important that we protect our hearts and the hearts of those we love. Check in on one another and be a part of a healthy blood pressure movement. Rally your squad to take the online pledge at releasethepressure.org. Brought to you by the Release the Pressure Coalition and the Ad Council.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That was the day the telephone girls, as they were called, walked out on strike against New England Bell, essentially crippling communications in 5 New England states. It was considered the most massive strike of women workers since the uprising of the 20,000 in 1909. They were members of the All-Women National Telephone Operators Department of the IBEW. Historian Stephen Norwood devoted many pages to the strike in his book, Labor's Flaming Youth. The government had taken over the nation's telephone and telegraph industries during World War I and placed it under the control of Postmaster General Albert Burleson. Just days earlier, thousands of angry women who worked in the Boston exchanges packed Faneuil Hall, demanding immediate strike action. Julia O'Connor, the leader of the Telephone Operators Union, called for the strike on this day at 7 a.m. The union demanded a 60% wage increase and full scale to be reached after 4 years instead of 7. Union and non-union alike responded to the strike call and walked off the job, establishing 24-hour picketing. On the second day of the strike, over 1,000 striking telephone operators marched through the streets of Boston and were cheered on by returning soldiers. O'Connor organized picketing around the Boston hotels where out-of-town strikebreakers were housed. Unionized service workers across the city denied services to the scabs. Postmaster Burleson smeared the striking women as unpatriotic and threatened to replace them with returning soldiers. The soldiers, however, sided with the telephone operators. After 5 days, the union won direct bargaining rights and a $4 a week raise. The strike was considered one of the few post-World War I strikes to end in victory. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
He's like, are you still interested in me? We're back. I'm Leslie Marshall. We are me and Rory Houseman. He's legislative director for the United Steelworkers. USW.org is the website. Check it out and follow them on Twitter at Steelworkers. Follow Roy at Roy Houseman. We're talking about getting manufacturing competitiveness right. We are talking about two bills, the Senate bill, the United States Innovation and Competition Act, which is USICA, and also we're going to talk a bit about the House bill, America Competes Act, which is Competes. Roy, thank you for holding. Welcome back. I feel like you were rushed for time regarding the Senate bill. Before we jump to the House bill, how is this looking as far as support? I mean, even though we have the Vice President Kamala Harris tie-breaking for Democrats who, tend to be in favor of, this type of legislation, we certainly have seen with infrastructure bipartisan support. But then there's that guy named Joe Manchin that sometimes throws a wrench in things for legislation that Democrats support. Is in the Senate with USICA their bipartisan support for this legislation?
Yeah, so there is bipartisan support here. 19 Republicans voted for the bill in May of last year. And, we see that as a positive development. And honestly, this is a good, if you want to hold China accountable, multinationals, you want to encourage that investment domestically, this is a great step. So we saw 19 Republicans join Democrats, all Democrats in support of the bill. So this, they passed their version, right? And what was interesting is they passed a big trade title in there, and we talked a little bit about this trade title where it didn't include some of the things that we want to have incorporated, like trade adjustment assistance, but it included a major tariff cut called the General Systems Preference Program. And what this is kind of a development program, or it was thought in the past, but it really, when you look at the top tariff cuts on some of these items, the number one item that received a tariff cut in 2019 was gold chains. Number 2 and 3 were handbags of leather or composite material, aka purses, of high value, of any value over $20. So we're talking about gold chains and Gucci bags for tariff cuts, while there wasn't any money for job training and a few of these other pieces, right? So we know that there's an opportunity to kind of take what the Senate product here, and then the House passed their product, and now we have to merge it, right? So they're doing something that used to be done all the time up here in Washington, D.C. was a conference committee.
Right.
Where they, and this is when you talk about he's just a bill, the old school rock pieces, where they would kind of go through, and that's the House would pass a bill, the Senate will pass a bill, and then they have to merge those two bills. And so they've selected 108 members of Congress to kind of go through these two bills and pull the pieces that are going to be the best to move forward and hopefully pass the Senate. So yeah, we know that there's Republicans that have supported one version, and now the House version, which I think the Steelworkers put a lot of effort in, and we know that with those added elements of the House, we could have a really good innovation bill. So that's why I'm very excited to talk to you all a bit, because we put some really big effort in here, and we're really doing engagement with senators, both Republican and Democrat, to highlight, hey, you guys have a decent product right now with USICA. If you put a few more elements from the Competes bill, we can knock this out of the park.
And also, you had mentioned the bill's going to conference. That's so Congress can just reconcile the differences between the two versions. And I do want to highlight one of the reasons you guys work so hard on the House bill is that the House version is the only version that really has meaningful changes for workers and manufacturing employers. So if I were to ask you, not the differences between the two versions, but what would be a great compromise? Obviously, the Senate incorporating more of the House bill and accepting accepting Competes over USICA because of those changes for workers and manufacturing employees. Let's break it down a little bit, okay?
Sure.
I love the first one we're going to mention, to be honest, when I was looking over these materials. Leveling the Playing Field Act 2.0, okay? This creates accountability, right? Why don't you tell people rather than me list, my little, the notes here that you guys are awesome to help me with.
Yeah.
Talk about leveling the playfield Act 2.0, because isn't that what we all want? I mean, that's not a political thing. That's a fairness thing, right?
No, this is really cool. So this is bipartisan legislation that's separate, that they have a separate bill both in the Senate and the House. But in the House, they incorporated the bill in Competes, right? So, in the Senate, Senator Brown and Portman, Republican, Democrat, are leading that legislation. And on the House side, it's Representative Sewell and Representative Johnson. And those two, and then a bunch of other members, which they're all wonderful for signing on. But really, this is like an update to our trade enforcement laws, because just the same as your phone has an operating system, it needs to be updated every so often. And I think one of the things that we do, our trade enforcement needs to do the same thing. So this will create some accountability, basically allowing workers and companies, when they file a trade case. This is basically when someone's dumping goods into the U.S. market at below market cost. They do this to capture market share and shut down American plants so that they can keep their plants in a foreign country operating. So we want to make sure that we capture and stop those things right as soon as they happen. So, for example, one of the things that we're seeing right now is this in China, they do this Belt and Road Initiative. It's an outbound investment piece, right? Where they're spending billions of dollars building plants in other countries like Vietnam, Korea, Indonesia, all over the globe, actually Serbia. And so this is one of those items where you can, with the leveling playing field 2.0 provisions that got added into the Competes bill, we can better hold these dumping multinational corporations and governments that are allowing dumping and illegal subsidies to happen and pushed into the U.S. market. So it's kind of technical, but at the same time, this is about, for us, we see our tire plant. In 2015, we had a plant in all these tire plants. We represent half the tire workers across the country. And they were seeing lost orders, and they were seeing a huge jump of tires into the U.S. market. And we won that trade case in 2015. Fast forward 5 years later, we had to file a whole new trade case against 4 other countries, and in part because we'd seen China put money into Vietnam, South Korea, and others to then build up capacity there and then dump tires back into the U.S. market. So now we've leveling the playing field 2.0 basically says, no, that's no good. We're going to stop that right now. We're going to hold these third country subsidies, is a technical word, and we're going to stop them at the border. And then there's other things like basically importers pull these tricks and basically try and cheat the system so that they can get lower tariffs. And so, for those that work hard and want to see our government work right, this is 101 for us. And we were super excited to see it included in the Competes Act. And knowing that it has bipartisan support on the House and the Senate, we're hoping to see it in the final product. So that's just one piece that we've spent a whole year on.
I know, and I can tell you're passionate about it. I can tell you're excited. I can tell you've been working hard and long on it. And we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to break it down a little bit further. Like you said, it's technical so that people understand, what this does, because accountability is a big umbrella over what Leveling the Playing Field Act 2.0 does, right? We're going to take a break. We'll be back. I'm Leslie Marshall. Our guest is Roy Houseman, Legislative Director for the United Steelworkers. Follow him on Twitter at Roy Houseman. Follow the Steelworkers at Steelworkers and check out their website, usw.org.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Can I touch this? Where does sand come from? Is this tree good for climbing? What happens if I mix these two things together? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Storing your guns securely is the best way to prevent family fire, including unintentional shootings. For more information on safe gun storage and ways to keep your family safe, visit endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org.
What do we keep in the attic? What's this thing called? Can I ride my bike backwards?
Like I said, kids are curious. It's up to us to keep them safe. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
Right now, our country feels divided, but there's a place where people are coming together. I gotta tell you, I was nervous to talk to someone so different than me.
Me too, but I'm glad we are.
Love Has No Labels and One Small Step are helping people with different political views, beliefs, and life experiences come together through conversation, and it feels good.
Wow, your story is so...
Interesting?
Yeah.
When people actually sit down, talk, and listen to one another, they can break down boundaries and connect as human beings. At lovehasnolabels.com/onesmallstep, you can listen to amazing, life-changing conversations and find simple tools to start a conversation of your own.
I know one thing. This conversation gives me hope.
It gives me a lot of hope, too.
Take a step toward bringing our country and your community together by having the courage to start a conversation at lovehasnolabels.com/onesmallstep. A message from StoryCorps, Love Has No Labels, and the Ad Council.
The opposite of courage is not cowardice, it's conformity. And right there's the problem with the big money establishment that now controls the National Democratic Party. This group certainly wants Democrats to be the majority party, but for what purpose? Based on the policies they actually push, they seek progress without change, only offering policy tweaks that conform to the existing corporate structure. Their idea of change is what near beer is to beer, only not so satisfying. Worse, when grassroots progressives put real FDR-style Big D Democratic ideas on the national agenda, the Dem hierarchy turns into a bunch of fraidy-cat Democrats, muling that a living wage law, health care for all, breaking up monopoly power, child care, strengthening unions, and other fundamental changes are too extreme. Such boldness, they cry, will frighten voters. They are, of course, wrong and politically inept. For such direct benefit, we're on your side changes in today's corporate-run system are the Democrats' most popular proposals. Polls confirm that this is especially true among working-class voters in manufacturing towns where Democrats have been getting creamed. Surveys by a group called American Family Voices show that these people don't think the party is too socialist or too woke, but too meek, too corporate, and missing in action. After all, they've seen CEOs move their decent-paying jobs out. They've watched monopolies and Wall Street squeeze the lifeblood out of family farm opportunities. They've witnessed Amazon and Walmart eating Main Street alive. Where, they ask, is the Democratic Party that once stood for us? These people actually despise big corporations, love unions, and yearn for a party that'll join them in battling the bastards. This is Jim Hightower saying, the question they have for Democrats is basic. Do you just intend to hold office or use it?
We're back. I'm Leslie Marshall. How you doing? Roy Houseman, Legislative Director for the United Steelworkers, is in the house. Houseman is in the house. He is our guest in this hour. Very pleased to have him. We are talking about getting manufacturing competitiveness right. There's a bill in the Senate, a bill in the House, the one in the House doing more for workers. Check out the USW, usw.org. Follow Roy on Twitter at Roy Houseman and follow the Steelworkers at Steelworkers. Roy, thank you for holding. Welcome back. Talking about leveling the playing field, Act 2.0, let's break it down a little bit more. Like you said, it's really technical. Would you say, or it's fair to say, that it creates accountability because it makes it easier for our workers and the companies that our workers work for to stop those offenders, specifically repeat offenders? And also, my understanding is it speeds up the enforcement process. Is that correct on these violations?
That's right. Like this is for us like a 101, and it's funny because they call it Leveling the Playing Field Act 2.0 because a few years ago, Sherrod Brown and Senator Portman led on Leveling the Playing Field Act 1.0, and it basically updates our trade laws. And so we've just got to keep going on that because it really is a situation where when we improve enforcement, we clarify the processes and timelines that allow our workers and our companies to better compete in these trade cases. It just moves things along. And at the last thing, it allows them to focus on the most important thing, and that's making goods, making the things to get out to American public. And, so they aren't spending money on, quite frankly, lawyers and others to try and build a trade case. They want to have this be fast. just the same as we expect we expect government to work fast, we expect business to work fast. And this is what those provisions really do, is
because we want our stuff fast. And like you
exactly.
said, you want them to, concentrate on making the stuff so we can buy the stuff and get it to us faster. You mentioned China, and you had mentioned that China and around the globe, there are products that are dumped here into the United States. This legislation, or this specific act within the legislation, would target grants for Chinese companies that spend billions on factories in China to do just this, right?
That's right. So yeah, what happens now is major multinational companies that are based in China, they will get money from the Chinese government to build plants in other countries now. And then they use that. So for example, in Serbia, they're building a 13.2 million tires unit facility. That's going to impact the region in Europe, and they're very likely to export those tires into the US. And so for our members, we want to be prepared if this tire plant dumps a bunch of tires into the US market. And that's what the leveling the playing field 2.0 is to say, no, we've seen the subsidies that China's being provided to Serbia. And we're saying, no, you can't bring those tires in now. Or we're going to raise the cost of those goods so that's on a level, even market, so that we don't see US firms lose and workers lose their jobs to nonsensical, basically subsidies that will put our members out of work. And then, that's just one kind of stool, right? And I think another stool that we're really excited about is this bipartisan effort that we worked on called the Supply Chain Resiliency Act.
You're reading my mind. That was my next question. That was my next question, because we when we talk about the dumping and all of that, the bottom line for that first act within the legislation is it helps we, the United States, become more efficient, right?
Yeah.
So talk to us about the Supply Chain Resiliency Act. A lot of money here for this.
Yeah, and this is Leveling the Playing Field Act is like the shield, and the Supply Chain Resiliency Act is like the sword, right? And if
I love that analogy.
Yeah, thanks.
No, I love it because it makes it simplistic, and it's I like it because it's visual. I mean and I love having a visual, and I think people understand better when you explain it like that.
Yeah, no, it's this idea that yes, a good defense is good, but an offense is great as well. And so you take this idea that we have in America for the last 40 plus years, we kind of got away from providing industrial support for our manufacturers. And it shows. Look, I worked in a paper mill for 5 years, and the investment in that plant, the company would do its private investment, but if we would have had a little bit more support, we could have probably retooled, and that plant could have probably lasted a lot longer. And this is one of those things that we saw an opportunity here working with Republican Representative Kinzinger and Democrat member Blunt Rochester and Representative Malinowski, another Democrat out of New Jersey, where they wanted to provide a fund in the Department of Commerce to rebuild our supply chains. Because we know, for example, I use this a lot, titanium sponge. It sounds kind of it looks like a sponge, but it is basically the base product for titanium. And the US doesn't produce it anymore. 67% of all titanium sponge production right now is in China, Russia, and the Ukraine. Think about that. So all your the aircraft landing gear, all these parts that require titanium, we don't have the capability, both for defense and for civilian purposes, to actually produce that in a time of crisis. Well, I hate to say it, but we might be in a time of crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And so this fund is designed to help.
And when two of those three are not our friends.
Yeah, exactly.
And you don't want a military crisis, and you have to look at two people who, God knows what your situation will be in the future militarily with those. To be dependent upon them for that.
Totally.
Or two of the prongs, yeah.
Yeah, and for us, we had 200 members in Henderson, Nevada, just right outside of Las Vegas, who would make this titanium sponge. And they lost their jobs in 2020 because of this plant closure. And they literally could produce 12 to 14,000 tons of titanium sponge that would go across the country and be made into the various important commodities. And so this supply chain resiliency fund would be targeted towards these key critical minerals and materials, so that U.S. producers know that they could get access to a fund and rebuild that supply chain. Because And we see this as super important. It will retool critical goods and industrial equipment, allows us to relocate manufacturing from China into the US. And then one of the things that we spent a lot of time working with Representative Kinzinger, because look, he's a Republican, so he's very hesitant, right? It was this idea of labor neutrality. And for us, like, this is a pretty straightforward thing. Is if the federal government's going to provide lots of resources to rebuild a supply chain, those jobs should be good jobs, right? And, so we found a way we worked with them and in a way to basically say, we're going to create a labor peace agreement. If the federal government provides resources to rebuild that supply chain and workers want to form a union there, let them form the union and not have all this nonsense of fighting and doing what the tactics that Amazon and Starbucks are doing today to these people just trying to get a basic collective bargaining agreement. That's all we really want is like this little agreement right here, which I'm holding up a CBA. Sorry for the radio people.
That's okay. The people that are listening, I think I don't know. It depends on the day, but yeah, a lot of people watch, especially on Fridays. Yeah. One of the things that I like in the Supply Chain Resiliency Act, if you could speak to this, is relocation of manufacturing facilities from China to the United States, which is what Americans want. There's no question. It doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican. We want more. We want factories brought back here. We want jobs brought back here. We want products made here. Yep. And I really think, I don't think I know that if there were more choices of what you can buy that's made in America, more Americans would buy made in American, and they would be more conscious of their consumerism.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a really neat piece, right? Is this idea, and, we know that there's these supply chains and that they're receiving all of this support in China. Well, this is an opportunity for us to say, well, we're going to support our workers and our manufacturers. And the Department of Commerce will, if this program comes through and they land it on the back end of this conference, like, this is an opportunity for manufacturers to go and get assistance from the government that isn't available to them otherwise. And other countries are already doing this. We compare this oftentimes as a lot of times American manufacturers show up to the global stage with a knife and a gunfight. And this is an opportunity, this Supply Chain Resiliency Act, to kind of retool, rearm, and get us back in the business of being a global supplier. And I think that's one of the cool things that working on a bipartisan fashion, we were able to kind of draft something that works for both sides of the aisle. And it was one of 52 bipartisan amendments that were added to the Competes Act. And I think that's something that's gotten lost a lot, is that the Senate Republicans try and use this tactic of saying, oh, well, the House bill is a partisan effort. And when we talk about 53 different bipartisan amendments added, you don't count the last vote, you count what the product is. And I think that's one of the things that we're excited about, is this ability to rebuild our supply chains and do it in a way so that American manufacturers and the workers can benefit with a good wage and good benefits.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk specifically about the Henderson, Nevada situation, because I like another part of that legislation. And then we want to talk about TAA, HCTC, and all that great stuff. We'll be back right after this. I'm Leslie Marshall. Roy Houseman from the USW is our guest. Don't go away.
What I know about courage, I learned from my adoptive mom. She said sometimes you just gotta hold on and know we'll get through this. Mom, we are so high up. Hold my hand.
No, you hold my hand.
Here we go.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more.
I learned patience from my adoptive dad. All he had to say was,
"Hey, you got this. Just breathe." Hey, we're pretty good.
Yeah.
Might have to start a band.
I got it.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more. This message is brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
COVID-19 has changed how we live and how we feel. We show up differently, worship differently, and have found new ways to express our love and support to family and friends. But now there are vaccines, and they are the first step that lets us get back into the things we miss most. Like spreading the word without spreading concern, girls tripping instead of solo sipping, brunching instead of late night munching, and talking smack with a side of mac and cheese. It's okay to have questions about COVID-19 vaccines.
Should I get it?
Should I wait?
Is it safe?
Can I trust it?
What about pre-existing conditions?
Now get the facts. Visit getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when COVID-19 vaccines are available to you. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome to Code WAC, your podcast on America's broken healthcare system and how Medicare for All could help. I'm your host, Brenda Gazar. Why isn't there more mainstream media coverage on the real impact our for-profit healthcare system has on people? What can Americans do to take back their healthcare? We recently spoke to Tom Hartman, America's #1 progressive talk radio show host and author of the book, The Hidden History of American Healthcare. Welcome to Code WAC, Tom.
Well, thank you, Brenda. It's great to be here.
So what's the most important thing Americans can do today to take back their health care?
Become politically active. This is a situation that we cannot individually solve. It's the reason why healthcare should be considered part of the commons. The commons is the stuff that government should have some province over. It's the stuff that none of us can do by ourselves or the place where the natural monopolies occur. Fire department, the police department, the public schools, the roads, the air and the water, the highways. These are all things that none of us could do individually, nor would we want to. And healthcare falls into that category. It's too large for any of us. It's too large even for a community. It's probably too large for some small states. So this is the appropriate province of government and healthcare, or at least the payment of healthcare. Eventually, I hope we get there. I think probably we will.
Thank you, Tom Hartman. Get the full Code WAC story on progressivevoices.com and on the PV app. Catch all our episodes by subscribing to Code WAC wherever you find your podcasts. This podcast is powered by Heal California, a nonprofit that uplifts the voices of those fighting for healthcare reform around the country. Until next time, stay healthy.
Huh? I'm good? All right. Hey, I'm Leslie Marshall. Welcome back. Talking to Roy Houseman, Legislative Director for the United Steelworkers. Follow them at Steelworkers. Follow him at Roy Houseman and check out their website, usw.org. Roy, before the break, when we talked about the Supply Chain Resiliency Act, and you had mentioned the 200 or so USW members in Henderson, Nevada, who lost their jobs. You were talking about that titanium sponge, and that plant closed in 2020. This legislation, as I understand it, and you could explain more, would also map and monitor critical industry supply chains that would allow us to respond to potential job losses in critical manufacturing. That to me sounds amazing. How can that be done with legislation?
Yeah, so this legislation basically sets up a system to have the government monitor and basically be proactive on when we start to see critical goods and manufactured goods move overseas. So think about this. I mean, I look at when our country dropped manufacturing investment subsidies.
So wait a minute. Sorry, I want to interrupt. So people understand. I apologize for the interruption. So just understanding. So it would kind of be able to predict the supply chain issue before it happens and predict a closure and job losses before it happens.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, this is what's really neat is this idea that, being proactive, like instead of letting government just respond, government being out there and being active to make sure that we don't lose this competitive edge. And that's one of the cool things about, I think, the Supply Chain Resiliency Act. Because you look, when you look in the past, when our country dropped manufacturing investment, the results are pretty staggering. I mean, we talked earlier about the loss of manufacturing jobs from 1979 to 2019. But right now, today, China accounts for 51.3% of global steel production, just one country. Like same with, we talked about titanium and how Russia, Ukraine, and China all account for almost 67% of global production. Look at aluminum. China alone represents 57% of global production. Rare earths, this is the stuff that goes into your phones and electronics and important for semiconductors. 70% of global production is based in China alone. Fiber optic cables, just allowing us to speak today, like that's almost 61% is all based in China. So this fund is like just to say it's time for us to rebuild some of that capability for us here in the US. And I think that's one of the key components why we've been so active on this. And for our members, who a good portion are in manufacturing, this is going to benefit them and benefit American public, because we all, good union workers, good union wage, they help support their communities. And I think that's one of the big reasons why we've been out there on supply chain so hard.
I think it also is what for years made America stand apart from the rest of the world. It certainly is the majority, the working class is the majority of this country, and built this country and can continue to build this country, into the future and take us forward and make it stronger and make better products. I mean, seriously, when we dog IKEA, but I mean, that's not furniture that's built to last. How many of us have a piece in our home or in our attic or garage, or somebody does somewhere?
Yeah.
A piece of furniture that was made in this country decades or generations ago, and it's still there. And you can still use it. Maybe you got to fix the cushion. Maybe it's a little tacky kind of print, but yeah, right? I mean, because it's made well. I also want to talk about the security that this legislation provides for workers here in the United States, and also to assist workers who've lost their job already because, we've talked about bad trade deals, right? We had this trade adjustment assistance, TAA. There's the health coverage tax credit, HCTC. That would make both of those permanent. That's game changer as well, and would take a lot of time away from guys like you. Sorry, my dog's barking. It would take. He wants to be on the show. He's jealous. To take away, time that you guys don't have to fight at the, at the, bargaining table time and time again for assistance, right? Trade adjustments assistance, or, for healthcare benefits, for healthcare coverage. I mean, the list goes on. The bill makes both permanent.
Yeah, no, this is a big deal, right? Like if you go back all the way to 2009, trade adjustment assistance has provided $8.8 billion in job training benefits across the country. And I think that that's a key item here that we don't talk about enough. It's like, my job is to spend a lot of time talking about job training, and the U.S. in compared to the rest of the OECD Organization of Economic, it's a big conglomerate of European and U.S. countries, and they basically do research. And on that, the OECD has found that the U.S. spends less per person than any other country other than Mexico in the OECD. And that's really on job training benefits. And this one program, Trade Adjustment Assistance, is one of kind of the beacon of like the ideal for job training. And I speak about it in a personal way because I went through the program, and having, we talked earlier about how I've helped a lot of people get the access to benefits. And it's pretty straightforward. If you want a good outcome and you want to upskill workers, then you pay them to upskill, right?
Absolutely.
It's 101. And so Trade Adjustment Assistance, the program that got added into the Competes Act, it's not just like a renewal. It's a better program, right? So it provides a child care credit because it's hard to go back to school to upskill for a new job when you have, you're not sure if your kid's going to be able to make it through child care. There's going
to be a gap there. And you need to fill that gap. Yeah.
And then the health coverage tax credit, as you talked about, it's a tax credit to help you pay for your healthcare coverage while you go back to school. And, I heard that over and over again at the mill. Like, when you have people, they have to, what do I do about getting childcare? And you realize, like, that's something that we can fix, right? And it's available if we pass these sorts of programs. And when, we talked about earlier, Congress is planning to pass a giant tariff cut, but they aren't going to provide job training benefits for workers. I just don't think it's the right, those aren't the right decisions. And that's why we're so excited to have this conference committee where they can merge these bills. And we're going to fight for the trade adjustment assistance. We're asking you guys, everyone on our members, to get out there, ask their members of Congress and their senators to basically say, are you going to include trade adjustment assistance? And why would you create tariff cuts for a bunch of items like handbags and Gucci and gold chains when you could pay for job training benefits that help all workers? So by making it permanent too, it just prevents this fight that we always do. So,
and I want to point out some of those Gucci handbags, depending on where you get them, aren't Gucci.
That's right.
God knows what you're paying for. We talked about bipartisan support for this legislation. Mm-hmm. And there's not just bipartisan support, but new polling from Data for Progress finds that a strong majority of voters, regardless of their political leanings, support the America Competes Act by a 65-point margin. Yeah. That's amazing. So you have Democrats, you have independents, you have Republicans. I think it shows that it's the right bill. We know it's the right time, right? We know it's the right time with everything going on in the world, especially with China and Russia, what we've been through with the pandemic, and we're not really through the pandemic entirely, what we've been through with the pandemic and what we are seeing still with the clog in the wheel with the supply chain. Why on earth aren't we having more than 19 Republicans on board for this?
Yeah, this is at the end of the day, in D.C., there's two rumors that go around about why this bill won't get done. And one of that is that the minority in the Senate, Senate Republicans, see any win to President Biden as a negative. And that's unfortunate. And quite honestly, it's a disservice to their states and to the workers in those states. And I think that that's a key piece here. Is I look at oftentimes on our Facebook page, you'll have a member or an individual say, well, President Biden, this or that. This isn't about President Biden. This is about 100 senators making a decision to invest in America. And I think that that's what we have to ask. So when Senator Grassley or Senator Burr, a couple of Republicans from North Carolina and Iowa, respectively, Senator Young out of Indiana, they're on this conference committee and they have a choice, right? They have a choice in investing in workers and trade adjustment assistance, investing in manufacturing with the Supply Chain Resiliency Act, and a choice in investing in our trade law with Leveling the Playing Field Act.
Look, bringing factories and jobs back to America is a win point as a politician running for re-election. Yep. So, like you said, the motivation has got to be that they care more about dinging an opposition party, which in this case for Republicans and Democrats, obviously, than providing for their constituency. Because some of the people that you've mentioned, they have states that have been hit very hard in this pandemic, and they need these jobs.
That's right. I mean,
very quickly, because we have 30 seconds. Last week.
No, I mean, and that's the point, right? Is that it should be for your community and for your home. And that's what this bill can do if we get it right. And that's why we've been asking everyone to weigh in. And so I really appreciate the time that you've given me today to talk a little bit about it, too.
Oh, I appreciate, Roy, you taking the time. Roy Houseman, Legislative Director for the United Steelworkers. Roy, always a pleasure. One time when I'm in D.C., we got to get a coffee or a cocktail. How's that?
Oh, that'd be wonderful.
I would love it. Go to usw.org. Follow the Steelworkers at Steelworkers. Follow Roy at Roy Houseman. I'm Leslie Marshall. Roy, thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend. A shout out to Mark Grimaldi, our executive producer, who I also hope has a wonderful weekend. Apollo, who was my co-host with Barking here on the show today. And thank you, Roy, for your understanding of that, the craziness all that we know from having home studios, right? And I think that's it, right, Mark? Over and out? Yeah. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Be safe. And please get vaccinated. All right. We're almost on the other side.